The Perfect Imperfection: How Vulnerability Transforms Black Women's Leadership. Have you ever noticed how we're all walking around with invisible armor? That shiny, polished exterior we've spent years perfecting, the one that says, I've got it all together, while inside we're thinking, I hope nobody notices I'm barely holding on. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Roberta Laymon, a visionary whose transformative work with Black women professionals has created not just ripples, but tidal waves of change throughout communities nationwide. Roberta doesn't just speak about vulnerability and empowerment, she embodies it with such authenticity that you can't help but be transformed in her presence. Her revolutionary insights into how strength and softness coexist have redefined leadership paradigms, particularly for Black women navigating the complex intersections of race, gender, and professional excellence. What struck me most about my conversation with Roberta was her unwavering belief that our wounds, when shared authentically, become portals to our greatest power. It's not a perspective you hear often in boardrooms or leadership seminars, which makes her work all the more revolutionary. Let's be honest. We live in a world obsessed with perfection. Social media feeds filled with filtered faces, LinkedIn profiles showcasing only the wins, never the rejections. And for Black women especially, there's this unspoken expectation to be twice as perfect, twice as strong, twice as unbreakable. The weight of this expectation isn't just heavy, it's crushing. But what if I told you that perfection is actually the enemy of power? What if the very things we're hiding, our struggles, our scars, our moments of doubt, are actually our greatest sources of strength? What if the cracks in our armor aren't flaws, but rather the places where our light shines through most brilliantly? This isn't just feel good philosophy. This is the lived reality I witnessed through the remarkable stories Roberta shared with me. Take Jenica, a high achieving Black woman professional who spent years embodying the strong Black woman trope. You know the one, the woman who handles everything, supports everyone, never complains, never cracks. The superwoman cape firmly attached to her shoulders, fluttering behind her as she races from one responsibility to another, never pausing, never resting. Behind closed doors, Jenica was exhausted, disconnected, burning out. Her achievements were impressive on paper, the promotions, the accolades, the perfect looking life, but the cost was her well being, her joy, her authentic self. She had become so good at being strong that she'd forgotten how to be human. Then one day something shifted. During a high stakes leadership meeting, instead of presenting her usual polished facade, Jenica did something radical. She got vulnerable. She shared how a painful childhood experience had shaped her drive for perfection, how her fear of being seen as not enough had pushed her to overextend herself for years, how beneath the impressive title and confident smile was a woman fighting to believe she deserved to take up space. The room fell silent, then something magical happened. One by one, her colleagues, many of them Black women facing similar pressures, began sharing their own stories. The masks came off, real connection happened, and in that vulnerable moment, Jenica discovered a new kind of leadership, one rooted not in perfection, but in authenticity. Vulnerability, Roberta told me, is not weakness. It's the ultimate superpower, especially for those who've been told they must always be strong. This reminds me of Janica Hughes Slaughter's journey. Janica carried the weight of trauma and the pressure to appear perpetually strong, a burden all too common among Black women expected to support families and communities without showing vulnerability. For years, she carried her emotional wounds in silence, the perfect professional on the outside, bleeding on the inside, the smiling face in every photo, crying when no one was looking, until she made a choice that would transform not just her life, but countless others. Yanika chose to share her story openly, to stand in her truth, scars and all. She transformed her pain into purpose and power, challenging the myth of perfection that had kept her caged for so long. The result? Her authenticity not only empowered her own growth, but created ripples of positive change for others. She became a role model for turning trauma into contribution, demonstrating that true strength is measured by authenticity, not silent endurance. As Roberta emphasized in our interview, when Black women allow themselves to be seen in their perfect imperfection, they create space for healing, connection, and collective empowerment. But vulnerability alone isn't enough. The second crucial element Roberta highlighted was the power of intentional support networks. We've all heard the saying, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. But for Black women navigating unique cultural and professional challenges, this isn't just motivational fluff, it's survival. Success flourishes when surrounded by people who hold you accountable with love, not judgment. Creating intentional tribes and support systems is a radical act of self care, especially in environments where you might be the only one or the first one. Jenica discovered this when she began building what she called her softness circle, a group of fellow Black women professionals who committed to supporting each other's authentic leadership journeys. They created a space where they could remove the cape, exhale fully, and be seen in both their strength and their struggle. This intentional community became the foundation for sustainable success, not the exhausting, burnout inducing kind, but the kind that nourishes the soul while achieving goals. Building accountable and loving support networks, Roberta explained, is essential, not just for professional advancement, but for wholeness. And then there's the story of Tiesha Redmond, whose journey illustrates another vital aspect of empowerment, reclaiming the power of pause. In a world of urgency culture where immediate responses are expected and boundaries are often trampled, Tiesha made a revolutionary choice. After years of overextension and burnout, she embraced intentional pauses. She reclaimed her right to respond on her own terms, challenging the expectation to be constantly on. This wasn't easy. As a Black woman in a high pressure environment, the fear of being labeled difficult or not a team player was real. The anxiety that taking space might reinforce negative stereotypes loomed large. But Tehesha held firm in her commitment to honor her own pace. The result? Deeper, more authentic connections, greater self respect, and a liberation from the pressure to perform perfection at all times. Her journey inspired other Black women to challenge harmful norms, prioritize self care, and lead with both strength and softness, a beautiful embodiment of what Roberta calls the power of perfect imperfection. What these stories from Roberta's work reveal is a profound truth. Empowerment is a daily choice, not a destination. No matter how heavy your circumstances, homelessness, family estrangement, toxic relationships, professional setbacks, your current situation does not define your future. Every setback is a stepping stone to a stronger comeback, and your story is still being written. This isn't toxic positivity. It's not about denying the very real challenges that exist, particularly for Black women navigating systems not designed with them in mind. It's about refusing to let those challenges have the final word on who you are and what you're capable of becoming. As I reflected on my conversation with Roberta, I realized that these stories challenge a fundamental myth in our culture, the myth that vulnerability and power are opposites. We've been taught that to be powerful means to be invulnerable, to never show weakness, to have it all together all the time. But what if true power comes precisely from embracing our humanity, our fears, our failures, our imperfections? What if the strongest leaders aren't those who never fall, but those who fall, get back up, and then reach back to help others rise too? What if our scars aren't something to hide, but rather the very source of our unique contribution to the world? These aren't just philosophical questions, they're practical ones that can transform how we lead, how we connect, and how we heal. The women in Roberta's work didn't just talk about vulnerability, they embodied it. They didn't just theorize about supportive communities, they built them. They didn't just dream about a different way of being, they chose it day by day, moment by moment. And that's the invitation I extend to you today, not as a distant ideal, but as an urgent call to transformation. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more perfectly imperfect leaders willing to show up with their whole hearts. I challenge you to take off the armor, even if just for a moment, to let someone see the real you, not the polished version, but the beautifully human one, to build a circle of people who love you not despite your imperfections, but because of the authenticity they represent. This is how we change not just ourselves, but our workplaces, our communities, our world. This is how we redefine power, not as dominance or flawlessness, but as the courage to be seen fully and completely. Your vulnerability is not your weakness, it's your greatest gift to a world desperate for authenticity. Your scars are not blemishes, they're the map of your unique journey, the source of your deepest wisdom. Your imperfections are not flaws, they're the very things that make you relatable, accessible, human. So today I invite you to embrace your perfect imperfection, to stand in your truth, whatever it may be, to build communities that celebrate authenticity over appearance, to lead not from a place of invulnerability, but from a place of wholeness, the kind that comes from integrating all parts of yourself, even the broken ones. Because in the end, it's not our perfection that will heal this fractured world. It's our willingness to show up as we truly are, scarred, scared sometimes, but still standing, still hoping, still reaching toward each other across the divide of our pretenses. This is the revolution Roberta Laymon's work has ignited. And it begins with a simple, radical choice to be real, to be vulnerable, to be perfectly imperfect. Will you join us?